and Big Bear Lake Councilmember Bill Jahn, and SCAG, Big Bear Lake Councilmember Bill Jahn, who's also SCAG President, Bill Jahn. Kome Ajise, SCAG Executive Director. And Rancho Cucamonga Mayor L. Dennis Michaels, also League of California Cities past president. And last but not least, my colleague on the Yorba City Council, Councilmember Peggy Huang, who serves on the SCAG Community Economic and Human Development Committee Chair and the RHNA Subcommittee Chair. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you everybody for being here today. Housing is such a key topic, and we really appreciate you all coming to this morning's session. So I'm the moderator, Randall Lewis, as Carlos said, and my job will be first to give a couple introductory comments. Really, I'm going to react to some of the things I heard this morning, some of the great takeaways. Then we're going to ask each panel member to introduce himself or herself, just a minute or two. I've got a round of pre-selected questions they have all seen, and then we're going to get into the Q&A with all of you. RHNA is incredibly complicated, but it's also going to be incredibly transformative to our region and our state. So it's really important that you pay attention to this session because it's going to impact every one of our cities and every one of our companies. Just some comments on what we heard this morning. I think first, the issue in San Bernardino County is not a matter of the will, it's just a matter of the how. We've got cities here, and every city that's here is committed to housing. We work with every city in the room. The leadership and the staffs are committed to housing. So it's really a matter of how do you do it? And I think some of the takeaways that we heard from Phil and Jim were really good, and their suggestions were on-the-ground suggestions. And Carlos's idea of trying to do the boot camps for planning commissions is a great idea. And trying to do those RHNA sessions to say, how are we going to deal with RHNA is really a good idea. So really pay attention to the things that you heard and talk to your staffs about the how, not the will. You've got the will, now we just need to figure out how to do it. A second part that was interesting was on the electrical panel that we just heard. I've been to that building in Irwindale that Terry talked about. It's fantastic. And I wanted to say the gas company has programs like that too, but we really need to reach out to the utilities. Energy costs and climate change are huge issues, and we need to partner with the utilities that got great resources for us. And then lastly, on the preparing the workforce for the future, the programs that you heard about from the community college and from BIA are fantastic. That BETA program, which William Meinholz, I think John Robertson was the one who really started that program. It's a great way just that we can build the workforce, and we can also provide jobs for the kids so they don't have to leave San Bernardino County. For any of the cities here, if you want to get that spread in your community through the school district, just talk to Lynn Kennedy here or talk to me. We hang out with the school superintendents all the time, and I can't guarantee we'll get total success, but I can guarantee, especially with Lynn, she is super persuasive with school superintendents. If you want to get programs like that in your districts, just talk to us and we can really give it a try to make it happen. With that, we're going to go to the panel now, and I'll start with Kome, and we'll just go to the line. So for each of you, just give a minute or two, just sort of who you are and what your issues are in RHNA right now, and then we'll get into the questions.
Hi, thanks Randall, and thank you Carlos and the BIA for the invitation. My name is Kome Ajise. I'm the Executive Director of SCAG. I think Carlos did a good job introducing what SCAG is. We're the regional planning agency for our 6-county region, the largest of the sort in the country. We don't have a really formal role in housing. However, every 8 years, SCAG is required by state law to perform the RHNA process. And this is why all cities love us so much. And so, but it's my privilege to be here, and hopefully we can have a conversation about RHNA that is not it doesn't bring about friction, but actually leads to more solutions.
Thank you, Randall. Thank you, BIA, for putting on this conference. It's an important one. My name is Bill Jahn. I'm a city councilman in the city of Big Bear Lake. I was elected in 2004 and have served 5 times as mayor. I'm past president of San Bernardino County Transportation Association as well as current president of SCAG. So your problems with RHNA, they're too long to list, but we're going to do our best at SCAG to tackle some of the problems on your behalf. Peggy serves as chairman of the RHNA subcommittee and is doing a fantastic job, by the way. And but I think it's important to note that we are. I said on the committee, and I chaired last cycle. We are kind of operating in a box, and we have very little flexibility as far as the state's concerned to operate outside that box. But I'll let Peggy talk about that.
Thank you, Bill. Well, thank you, Carlos and BIA, for the invitation to speak with all of you today, and really just having this conversation, this very important conversation that we should all have. You know, as you might imagine, for our RHNA subcommittee, having representatives from 6 counties in a very diverse region that we live in, we are a place of lively conversations and trying to reach the goals that we need to reach in order to facilitate the future needs of housing needs of this region. It's been quite a task trying to put all those interests together, but I am very proud of our committee. What we've been able to do is just keeping an eye on the ball that this is a regional solution and not about protecting our backyard. I'm looking forward to working with everyone within the committee as well as outside the community. I think that all of us coming together, we will be able to address some of these challenging factors.
First of all, I want to say thank you, President Burham, for holding this today. I know you love that term, President. So, as well as the both of you staff for putting this on. Truly, we as cities want to be partners with not only the development community, but our state legislature. My name is Dennis Michael. I'm the mayor for the city of Rancho, Cucamonga, the home of shutters and sidings. And just kidding. I asked Phil if it would be okay to say that. But seriously, I've been mayor since 2010, on the city council since 2004, and served as I think the only person, elected official ever to be the president of the League of California Cities. I currently serve on their board, as well as the San Diego County Transportation Authority, representing our community, and along with Bill, serve on the regional council representing the cities of Upland, Montclair, and Rancho, Cucamonga. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I can tell you, I'll tell you a little bit later about how I think the League can partner with our development community on a statewide basis so that we can come out with a greater outcome.
Good. Kome, I'm going to throw you a zinger that's unscripted. We're all guilty of acronyms and jargon. Not everyone in the room probably knows what RHNA is. Can you give us about 90 seconds or so now, just what RHNA is for those who don't know?
Absolutely. RHNA is RHNA, Regional Housing Needs Assessment. We call it RHNA for short. Somebody actually said maybe we should stop calling it RHNA because it just brings out negative feelings when you say RHNA. And so we're hoping we'll call it Rihanna. And, I didn't expect the joke to work. This is great. So you have a better feeling about this process. The Regional Housing Needs Assessment is on an 8-year cycle, and basically the essence of it is the COG, which is SCAG, is required to do an assessment of what our regional housing needs will be for the next 8 years. And we work with the Housing Community Development Department at the state level, and they also weigh in and tell us what that number is for the entire region. Now, where the fun really begins at SCAG is how we divide that number amongst all 197 jurisdictions, cities and counties within the SCAG region. How we divvy up that number such that each one of our jurisdictions now has a number that they have to plan for, and they have a year from when they get that number to update their housing element to show how those units will be built. And that's where the rubber meets the road, as they say.
Kome, one other zinger. I would bet at least 30% in the room don't know what SCAG is. Could you tell us what SCAG is?
Such a nice acronym too. SCAG, SCAG stands for the Southern California Association of Governments. which is your regional agency organized under both federal and state law to do regional planning. We've always maintained that the city is probably the best government level you could have because it's closer to the people, but there are issues that tend to be beyond cities, like air quality, like transportation, all those things transcend cities, and you need a regional entity to look at the higher level on how this coordination can have play. So under state law and under federal law, we are required to do that kind of planning. That's what we do at SCAG. And all three of them here are my bosses, so be gentle.
There's one other boss here. I've had the good fortune of serving on the elected executive committee for 10 years, though I'm non-voting, so I guess I'm not one of your bosses. Bill, you've got the good fortune, and SCAG has the good fortune to have you as president for the next 11 months. Can you talk about some of your initiatives on housing first, and then talk about how you see SCAG will be working with industry on RHNA and other issues?
Yeah, it's important to point out when I was elected president during my welcoming speech, I mentioned that one of my priorities is housing. I mean, I'm a housing guy. I grew up in the housing industry. My dad was a builder. My older brother was a builder, and my wife and I have been building homes since the early 80s. So it's an industry that I know and love, and today we're retired. We retired about five years ago, but it's important for SCAG to weigh in on some of these housing issues on a basis. The housing shortage. The housing shortage is a result of decades of not meeting the needs of tomorrow on some of the actions that we've taken today and in the past. And an important component to the regional planning is thinking about the impacts beyond jurisdictional boundaries. So our strategies at SCAG is to address the housing crisis. To address the housing crisis, it's required for us to think beyond those boundaries. And this fits into my regional vision and priorities as SCAG president, which include encouraging us as a region to push beyond the boundaries, whether they be boundaries for planning for today or boundaries for the individual cities. But we need to recognize those boundaries and push beyond them if we can.
Good. Kome, you've talked about what SCAG does. Can you talk about some of the resources that SCAG has for cities, for developers, for others in this housing crisis we're in? And also talk about some of the creative solutions you're beginning to see cities doing throughout the region.
I'll touch on it a little bit. So at SCAG, what we do best is we provide technical assistance. We don't implement. We basically are here to aid all of our member jurisdictions, 191 cities and 6 counties, aid them where they need help or where they need capacity in getting things done. Part of what we do is provide grants to be that spark on ideas that could work, and also bring examples of best practices that have been done in parts of our region or even parts of the state or across the country, and bring those best practices to a conversation at our either at our policy committee meetings, one of which is chaired by Peggy Huang here at the Community and Economic Housing Development, the CEHD committee as we call it. Bringing those kinds of conversations to the table so that we're exposing our jurisdictions to that information. But I think for our money, the best thing that we do is we actually provide data. We have the data that most cities, if not all cities, need to make decisions. And beyond just cities, data that the private sector needs to be able to understand the DNA and the basis of our communities so they know where to play. So those are some of the things we bring to the table. The data, we're the convener of thought. We also bring resources such as grant monies to the table to help cities do or start ideas that may ultimately work out in ultimately building housing. And I think we'll talk about SB 102 shortly in this conversation, which is, I think, opportunities that we see in the future of even growing that capacity.
What are some of the innovative things you're seeing cities doing throughout the region? And Kome has experience throughout all of California or other parts of California.
Well, one of the things that we're seeing is one of the more recent experiences that we've had is in light of the loss of redevelopment, which used to be the energy a lot of communities had to subsidize housing and housing construction. We're beginning to bring back some element of tax increment financing through the use of enhanced infrastructure finance districts, EIFDs. It's a very difficult process. There's probably 3 or 4 EIFDs that have taken off. The law has been on the books 5 years. We've only had maybe 3 or 4 across the state that's working. We have one in Laverne here in our region, but the most promising one that we see is the one that we're working with City of Placentia and Orange County on around the Metrolink station, which will allow them to build infrastructure that will support transit-oriented development. We're also seeing experiences where cities are beginning to look at using state funding from cap and trade monies and it's actually through a lot of developers that are applying directly to the Strategic Growth Council in Sacramento, and we help with those processes to bring those resources back. And we're talking millions of dollars that would subsidize affordable housing, and we're seeing some really beautiful products being put out in places like Anaheim and other parts of our community. And in fact, I think a new grant awards were just made in the last week, and we have, I'm not sure how much now, but in the tens of millions of dollars that are coming to our region to help finance some of this housing. And I think I'll just stop there and see where we go with the
Kome,
conversation.
one more, and this will be a commercial for SCAG. They have something called the City Data Profiles, and you do the Toolbox Tuesdays and others. Can you talk about the profiles and some of the working sessions SCAG does that are completely free and completely open to the public?
So we do the Toolbox Tuesdays, and really the intent is SCAG maintains a lot of, we have parcel data on every single parcel in our region, 4 or 5 million parcels that we have in the region. What that means is we know what's on the parcel, we know what the zoning is, what the actual land use is, and all the things that are around it, because we model all of that in our planning process. But beyond that, we've also built what we call local profiles, and we do this every 2 years, and the newest version of the local profiles were published in May of this year, last month, where each city's profile is put together in a book, and it's on our website. You can have access to your local profile. We provide that information to the elected officials within each city, so you could see what the various indicators are within your city, population, employment, and household formation. Every single detail of the data we have across the region, we actually aggregate them by city and county, so we have that information. But we also have the ability to use that information to do scenario planning. So we have a scenario planning model that is available for our cities to use, and they can take the information within their city and vary it in whatever ways they want, whether it's to develop a specific plan or a more comprehensive planning activity, or just a conversation with the community. So that's one element that comes out of the SPM model that we have. And we do training on a regular basis with our jurisdictions on that data set. So these are some of the activities that we have at SCAG. We have regular technical meetings with technical staff across the region, those who are interested, both at the general transportation level, but also at the transit planning level. We work with various entities across the region. Again, with the intent that we are trying to evolve a vision. We're in the middle right now of developing the signature product that we do every 4 years, which is a regional transportation plan. We call it Connect SoCal. We're trying to evolve a vision of what this region would look like between now and 2045. And we've just wrapped up a series of workshops. I had about 28 workshops across the region with public input, and also had a town hall session on telephone call with 2,000 participants on that town hall. Again, with people inputting to us what they think the region should look like growing out. We expect to grow by about 4 million people between now and 2045. We need to figure out where we put them, how we connect them, and how we continue to maintain a sustainable region over time.
Great, Kome, thanks so much. I'm going to skip Peggy and go to Dennis, and then we're going to wrap up with Peggy. Dennis, and your questions will split in half. First question, Rancho Cucamonga has really been a leader in the region in terms of density and apartments, and this is not self-serving, we do a lot of it. I was given this question to ask, but talk about Rancho's attitude towards density apartments. What have you learned? Because you really are a leader in the region on that.
Well, first of all, I would say that, you know, not every city embraces apartment dwellings. In a lot of cases, sometimes those cities have a reputation because of the clientele that are living in the apartments, and landlords become an issue, and crime begins to be an issue, and the public says no more of this. But in Rancho Cucamonga, we place a high priority on not only the design standards, but also the police enforcement and working with our landlords to make sure our properties that are apartment dwellings are kept up to standard so that we attract the right kind of people with the right kinds of income into those areas, and crime is significantly reduced as a result of that effort. As far as apartment dwellings go, I believe it doesn't really work for us in building an apartment complex in a residential neighborhood, but we have been always known since 1977, when we adopted our first general plan a couple years thereafter, as a city with a plan. And we have an area that has estate homes, and we have various types of housing types and housing product, all the way from apartment dwellings to now smaller dwellings. And I'll only use the project recently. It takes boldness on a city council or any council to face the public who wants no more apartments because they talk about traffic and they talk about other issues related to their experience with apartments. I'm proud to say that our city council changed the zoning from an open space golf course to a transit-oriented development called the Retreat, and got a tremendous amount of pushback, but our council, at the end of the day, when it came time for vote, voted 5-0 to approve the project. And right now we're seeing single-family dwellings, smaller albeit, selling probably by one developer that will be building in the high 3s to low 400,000s. So as far as density goes, we believe in density in the right place. We have a transit-oriented development called the Retreat. We're working on another transit-oriented development along our Metrolink station. We have some challenges with the parking on the parking lot. We would like to see a little more leeway in getting this project moving forward. So we're in partnership with our San Bernardino County Transportation Authority, as well as the builder, as well as our city. So we're working on that idea because I believe that if we're going to create density, the best place for it is along our transit corridors. And it doesn't work in other areas of our city, but it certainly works along our transportation, Foothill Boulevard, Haven Avenue, along our transportation corridor, that we hope we will get a bus rapid transit system along Foothill Boulevard from one side of this county to the other one day, along Hope Boulevard in Ontario. So there's a lot of opportunity. And density does not necessarily mean affordability in a lot of cases. Higher density, in some cases, it's not the cheapest thing to build because you're building up higher. But I can tell you that the kind of product and the development community, they understand people want a diversity in the housing stock. Not everybody can afford to live in a single family dwelling. Not everybody after the big recession, they don't want to buy a home anymore because they're afraid that they get caught on the downside if they decide to have to move. So they embrace apartment living, they embrace the amenities in our apartment complexes. And we are very, very committed to doing the right thing for the right reason each and every time. Affordability, it breaks my heart when we talk affordability, that it's over with now, but in 2011, the one tool we had in government was our redevelopment agencies. And we don't have that tool, and I don't think we can build our way by reducing standards or anything else, or reducing fees. I don't believe we can build our way out of it without some subsidy from our state, federal, and governments, and working with our building community. Maybe we would be huge supporters of tax increment financing, huge supporters of tax credits to create the environment for affordability so that people can afford to live in the home where their parents live, and parents can enjoy having their family there.
Good. Dennis, thanks. Next question, which is really going to be a tough one. As we're going through this issue on RHNA and all the growth controls and issues coming out of Sacramento, one of the big issues that's coming up is the issue about what should come from Sacramento and what should be from local control. Dennis, you were the state president of the League of Cities. Sam has been super active at the local League of Cities. How does the league look at this issue of local control? And how do you, wearing the hat of you're a SCAG representative, you're a Rancho representative, but you're a league representative, how do you see the issue of local control versus mandates? And then Peggy and Bill, after he answers, going to ask you to answer from the point of view of your cities. But Dennis, how do you look at it from the league point of view?
Well, starting off with the very first strategic priority we have for 1920 is the very first priority is more housing, to work with our development community to create more housing, to build the financial tools to get that program running, to not only do that, but to address the homeless issue. So housing and homelessness is two of our big priorities for this year. As far as the state goes, we will do just like the building industry would do to protect your interest as a building industry. The state of California, League of California Cities would protect our ability to have local control be at the local level, not at the state level. It wasn't terribly long ago when there was a piece of legislation that died, fortunately, but it was dealing with development, and if you did a certain amount of things that the developer wanted to do, that it would require no public input whatsoever. You couldn't even hold a public hearing to get the project approved. We need our public's input. Our public, even though they don't get their way, they feel at least they had a way to share their feelings about the project. Our city council has been re-elected and re-elected and re-elected, and we have approved the affordable housing project over the years when we had a redevelopment agency, and you thought there was heresy in the council chambers, but we stood up to it, and we have some beautiful facilities, and you would think it was at market rate. So I think the state of California, the league, we are huge proponents, and I was talking to Carlos earlier, and I'm going to make sure that as a board member to the league, that I will get with the league executive board and the league staff and talk about ongoing meetings with the state BIA to talk about what our issues are, what your issues are, so that we can come together as one group. And we know we need more housing. We got to build it. I think the governor's lofty goal of $3.5 million homes, or 3.5 million homes, excuse me, that's only in Rancho, the 3.5 million. Just kidding. But 3.5 million homes in 5 to 7 years, when probably the most we ever built was 250 in the best of times, is a huge, huge issue to face. And I hope that we can all sit down at the table realizing we all have a stake in this issue. We all have a responsibility to do what we can do. And a lot of cities in this state, whether it be along the coast or elsewhere, have a huge aversion to building any other product other than what they're used to. And I talked to one council member in Santa Barbara County, in a city what I won't name, said, look, we're not building anything but $1 million homes. There's no home in our city that will be less than $1 million. And my reaction was, okay, that's part of our problem, is we need to really start looking at what we can do collectively to solve this problem. Because the other issue with the density and the amount of housing that I feel very concerned about, and it deals with fees, or development impact fees and other kinds of fees. If we're going to build all these houses, how do we deal with the infrastructure necessary to support the added population? And that's a concern. The traffic, the transit-oriented development type things, the transit systems and so forth. So, but the league stands ready to be a partner with the development community, and the legislature has a penchant to take away local control, because they think from Sacramento, they can do it better than we can at the local level, and that just hasn't proven to be the case.
Thank you, Dennis. Peggy, I've got different questions for you on the arena, but this issue that Dennis just answered and Bill answered next, we want local control, but as Dennis said, we've got coastal communities and other that if we left it them, they're not going to do it. So how do you, first from Yorba Linda's point of view, and then Bill from your point of view, how do we deal with that right balance of a lot of cities will do it, but a lot of cities aren't going to do it?
Thank you for that question, because I am extremely proud of the city of Yorba Linda. I believe Yorba Linda probably has the very proud distinction of having its council members recalled over development. So we have quite a history in our city on housing issues. A group of residents rose up and we actually had a recall petition and a recall election of 2 of our council members who stood up and said we are going to do what we need to do to meet our housing element requirements. And what I took away from that whole experience was the need of local control is very, very important, because this whole idea of what Dennis was talking about local participation. I was one of the first people out there, I admit, saying this is crazy and we can't build that many homes here in Yorba Linda. We simply didn't have the land for it. But learning about it and understanding that we need to be part of the solution rather than being the part of the problem of the housing crisis, being out there talking to members of the public and educating them that it is better for us as a city and as residents to participate in the process of talking about projects, talking about where to build, than letting Sacramento do it. It led to the successful defeat of that recall. And so I think that it's important that we continue with the support of the league and every organization in the building industry and others, and you support local control, and that the idea of one size fits all does not work. But most importantly, as city council members, we go out, we engage with our residents, letting them feel a lot more power in the decisions of their lives. There were many who had opposed our RHNA requirements back in 2014. As we brought them along in terms of building our projects, they had an opportunity to engage with the builder and being able to participate in not just the density. I mean, in fact, the builders were wonderful. They worked with the residents about density, about height, about how the project will look. Those have led to successful products, and many of them sold out quite quickly. As residents felt that they were part of the process, they came to the city council and said, we are in support of this project, rather than we are against this project. And that's what we need to do here at the local level. And as long as we have that local control and that local engagement, we can meet our housing elements requirements, as well as having successful projects being built that everyone is happy about. If we don't have that local control, then what we're going to have is this resistance from the cities to everything that is passed down from Sacramento, not wanting to be part of it, and we'll continue to see this housing crisis.
Bill, how do you, Peggy, we're going to come back to you, but Bill, how do you look at this issue of local control? And again, think of it either mountain cities or coastal cities. They're going to say, hell no, we're not going to do it.
Yeah, the city of Big Bear Lake is the only incorporated city in the San Bernardino Mountains, so we're kind of an island, if you will, up in the forest. But our city, I don't know if it's the altitude or what, but they're fierce about local control. And every time Sacramento comes up with a new game plan, our city council goes nuts I mean, we're a small city, we're about 5,000 people. We've developed over 150 affordable housing units in our city limits. The area to the east of our city is county area, and we've pretty well met all of our RHNA numbers. We'll see about this year, I'm not sure, but so far we've exceeded our RHNA numbers. But local control is a huge deal. Unfortunately, our friends in Sacramento continue to put pressure on our cities, on SCAG, on some of our sub-regional councils with legislation that they're introducing almost on a daily basis to take away the local control. And I think the governor's trailer bill that he signed last night is a perfect example of that, to where if cities aren't in compliance, they can be fined up to $10,000 a day. A day or a month? A month, I'm sorry. But, you know, that's just another example of what Sacramento's doing. Now, I will hand it to my friend, Mayor Michael, for his work on the league, as well as BIA's work in lobbying our legislatures to let them know how some of this legislation affects our cities and our counties. But the battle's not over, and I can tell you that they're not going to give up. And it's just something that we're all going to have to come together on and lobby as one.
Good. Peggy, now it's your turn for the big questions. You have the fortunate or unfortunate, I think, task of chairing the RHNA work that SCAG is going to be doing. Talk about the committee, talk about the subcommittee, talk about some of the changes you're seeing now with what Sacramento's trying to do, and talk about how cities here should think about their RHNA obligations.
It's been quite fun, I have to say. I'm rather optimistic because I'm working with a group of people who truly want to solve the problem. Bill is on the committee offering his wisdom, having gone through it 3 times, I believe. Twice, so this is the 3rd. And so that type of wisdom helps. This cycle has been very challenging because soon after we convened, Huntington Beach got sued. And so that made everybody very jittery, and it does not contribute to the conversation. I think rather it made a lot more people apprehensive and not wanting to be at the table anymore, because I think a lot of cities have this feeling, well, despite all I've done, the state is still coming after me. So why even put in the work? Why, especially for elected officials, why put myself out there and get slaughtered by my residents because, you know, the AG's office will sue me anyways. So it's been quite challenging. Earlier this whole idea of meeting the RHNA number has been very difficult. We don't know exactly what it is. We have heard so many numbers, 1 million to 3 million, whatever millions you want to put together. The problem that I see from the governor's office of wanting to build all these housing units is the failure to recognize that it took decades for us to get to this point. You can't build your way out of it in such a short amount of time. I've made the statement and argument before that I can take away every single commercial and retail plaza and put up as many homes as possible, and it's still not going to meet those needs. But what I will see is a total devastation to local economy, if not the entire Southern California region. And unless the Sacramento can figure out how to support all of us on welfare checks, I mean, there's no way that the city can build its way out of it in such a short amount of time. And what has also been very difficult in this cycle is these additional factors we never had to look into. In addition to existing needs, we have to look at overcrowding, and we have to look at cost burden. And on top of that, being near high quality transit areas. Those are additional pressures. I don't know if they're realistic factors. I see them as feel-good factors, but it's what it really does is it's actually making it more difficult for cities to reach in housing element that will pass with HCD or the housing, what does the C stand for now? I can't remember. Sustainable communities. So it's really going to be difficult in that sense. If you take, for example, the definition, which is the only definition we have for overcrowding, which is 1 person per room. Well, if you look at the new products that are coming through, how do you count for a great room where the kitchen flows into the living room? I mean, that's it. So you can only have 1 person in there. Well, if you're a couple with 3 kids and you're living in, and maybe your parents are living with you, that's 5 people, a 3-bedroom home, you're overcrowded. I don't know how that could work within this new model. This type of top-down idea of overcrowding and defining overcrowding that way is inconsistent with the way we're building. In order to achieve these numbers, these units, you have to have smaller homes. Well, smaller homes means creative building designs, and if you're doing great rooms, you'll never be able to, as a city, be able to meet those housing elements. The other thing that I see that has been a struggle for the committee has been these competing factors or conflicting factors. For example, the governor promotes density near transit areas. All right, well, that sounds really good. That'll help us with our greenhouse numbers. But then there's an additional element, but you can't have over-concentration of affordable housing units in one area. Okay, well, that kind of competes with the idea of transit. If I try to put them near transit to meet that goal, I will have an over-concentration in transit area, which means we would have to, as a city, put it, or as a region, put it out in a more, out in more of a less dense area, which then would cause the greenhouse numbers to go up. So I think these are the factors that are very difficult for the subcommittee to work through when they're competing. So what I have, and on top of all this, is this idea of comparable region. So how SCAG could be a comparable region with other areas. So this is how the governor is going to look at whether we're in compliance, is how do we compare to other regions? Well, I am the first to argue there are no other regions in the entire United States like Southern California. And I won't bore you with the data. Like Kome said, we're very good with data. This is a data-driven committee, but I won't bore you with that other than to say, I am confident with all the data we have looked at across the nation, there are no other regions like Southern California. It's more like other people have to compare themselves to us, never the other way around. And so that is a very difficult question to answer as we go through this RHNA process, because we couldn't find other areas in Southern California like us. I think that with the last point I would make is about this trailer bill, what I see the problem with it is this punishment idea. That's actually detrimental, because the first thing that the state legislature should have looked at in all these housing bills is taking care of these conflicting or competing laws that I just identified. Without dealing with those issues, I don't see how we can meet this 3 million number, okay? Because we literally, as a planning agency, we can't, as a planning for the city, you don't have much space to work. So I think that is going to be very difficult. They can penalize the cities and the region as much as they want, but the truth of the matter is what's causing a lot of this problem is these conflicting factors that when you try to meet one box, it took you out of another box. And I don't have a great suggestion for them, but I do see that the members of our committee struggling through that.
Good, Peggy, thank you. You sure can.
Working with Peggy, I chaired the last cycle 8 years ago, and all of the issues that Peggy's talking about, like housing and transportation corridors, overcrowding, those are all brand new issues that the legislature has introduced over the last 8 years. So it's just an example of how there's tightening down the screws on the cities and regional councils and all that.
Well, and I think for the county, we've got two mismatches that are unique to San Bernardino County. The first is a mismatch of where the land is and where the demand is. We've got a lot of land, but I'm not sure we're going to fulfill all the demand in Yorba and Baker and places like that. So we've got to figure out this mismatch there. And then a second is the mismatch between the densities that the state is looking for and what the customers want to live in. And so those are two things I think going forward, we really have to look at those mismatches. We've got about 13 or 14 minutes. I've got two broad questions for the panel, and then we'll have a couple Q&A from the audience. First broad one, and this is one, Kome, I'll start with you, and you guys can opt in or not. But you've heard this reference to the governor did his budget yesterday and passed sort of the trailer talking about housing. Could I get just a minute or so reaction to what each of you have heard on the trailer in terms of what Sacramento's trying to do on housing?
Well, thank you. So the governor signed the budget, and typically, having worked in Sacramento for about 20 years, typically what follows the budget is a bunch of trailer bills that actually implements what the intent of the budget is. And the one particular trailer bill that is of interest is SB 102. It's still in print, so it's got to be in print for 72 hours before it gets to be voted on, so it's still not acted on yet, but we expect that it will be acted on. What it does is it provides a number of carrots and sticks to us at the regional level and also to cities, and allows for us to be able to ultimately build housing. I think that's the intent. And we've been SCAG, we've been involved with this for, I believe, a better part of about 3 months, if not more, in its growth and development, and it's worked across a lot of stakeholdership to get to this point. I think it's honestly one of the most thought through piece of legislation that you'll see come out of Sacramento, because it's a reaction to the backlash of the grab at local control, and this is a way to come back with some measure of carrots. I'm not paying attention to the sticks in it, because our hope at SCAG is to make sure that we help our jurisdictions to never be in a position where they will have to face the mandate of the sticks, because we would try to actually optimize and use the carrots as much as possible to get us where we're going. Real quickly on the carrots is it provides $250 million. It's a one-time funding, $250 million. $125 million is split among cities to help them do all of the work that they need to do to get towards housing production. And then the other $125 million is given to regions across the state, and out of that, SCAG gets about $50 million. And we will use our $50 million to again create a housing program that allows us to push more of those resources for technical assistance to our cities as quickly as possible. We have to spend the money by 2021. And so that's at $250. There's another $500 million that goes directly to cities and counties for infrastructure building, for infill development. And so that's another source of funds that we would be looking to make sure that our region gets as much as possible. That goes into subsidizing the actual construction of housing. And so that's what SB 102 does. Now, the carrot side of it is if you don't do the things you need to do, like having your housing element in compliance, if you're out of compliance, then you can be fined through the court system. So it will be the Attorney General that brings that suit against you in the court system. My expectation is we will not be in a place where any of our cities will find themselves doing that, because we will work very vigorously with you all to make sure that we're trying to use the resources that's available to get things done, so we're not out of compliance.
Good. Bill, quick reactions, and then
Sure.
Dennis.
Yeah, sure. I think the point that I'd like to get across is the $50 million that SCAG's going to get, can be used to help our cities get their general plan updated, the housing elements in place and all of that. So if you're a city that are short on funds, which I know a lot of us are, SCAG can help from that perspective. SCAG also, one thing that has to be kept in mind is even as the legislation moves through, we're going to have to file applications that include, SCAG will have to file applications that include action plans and how the money's going to be used and you know, how we're going to increase planning and facilities for local housing production, that kind of stuff. So we're still working on all of that. But the good news is it looks like it's going to happen, and we're going to have some of that seed money for our cities to come into compliance.
Peggy?
Well, I was very happy to see that there are some incentives and programs in there to help cities. We have so many cities that are struggling, but of course, I'm on the pessimistic side on this, which is $250 million is not going to help a lot of cities, considering how many are in the state and how much we're competing for. But as I previously mentioned, no matter how good this bill could be, as long as the conflicting issues that I brought up are not addressed and those laws are not cleaned up, cities and the region, the SCAG region will continue to have the difficulty that we are facing currently in trying to meet those housing element requirements.
Thank you. Dennis?
Very quickly, I was talking with the league office this morning about the piece of legislation. Right now it's 150 pages, and it just came out last night at late at night. Today, I think the league will have a position on it, but I can assure you they're not going to be really thrilled about the stick part of it. And the reason for that is, the stick part is if you don't have a housing element, you can be fined, Kome, correct me if I'm wrong, between $10,000 and $100,000 a month by a judge. We have 482 cities in the state of California. 40 of them do not have their housing elements. And I'll bet you, I don't have an idea of who it is, but I would be willing to bet that most of those cities without a housing element probably can't afford a consultant to go ahead and put it together, and probably don't have the staff expertise. They're probably smaller cities, and you levy a fine of $100,000 a month on that city, there's a potential you could bankrupt some cities. They're that much on the edge with all the other challenges we have. So I think the MPOs throughout the state need to help those cities, whoever they may be, and we can get there. As far as the positive side, we're very happy to see that happening. But it's just going to be a difficult time right now to see how we're going to deal with all the various elements, but I think there's some value to it, and I'm really happy about the other side of it, whereas the carrots. So thank you.
Kome, you get a hall pass on this one. So from the very beginning, we heard from Carlos, we heard from Phil, we heard from Jim, we heard from Terry. This is a partnership. We're all in this together. I want to ask the electeds, what can BIA, what can their builder members, their associates, how can we best work with cities to solve the housing crisis? Bill, we'll start with you.
Well, I think the biggest way you can help is stay involved. Stay involved with your local cities, stay involved with your regional councils, and we need to work together, we need to form coalitions so that we can beat back some of this stuff that's coming down from Sacramento. But my biggest wish would just to make sure that Carlos and his team, the state BIA, stays involved with our regional council in our local cities. I know Carlos is already involved. He sits on one of the policy committees for SCAG, and is making a real contribution there. So that would be my hope.
Peggy?
Well, speaking from just Yorba, I would like to encourage the builders to work with the city councils and as well as the local residents. We have seen amazing products in Yorba, achieving the density that I never thought was possible in our town, just because the builders took the initiative and met with the residents early on, making them feel they were part of the conversation rather than being the recipients of results and consequences that they refuse to, or they just like the products. by being that engaged in the level, at that local level, and with the residents, you'll find that a partnership creates a product that everybody's proud of. I think, speaking as an elected official, nothing makes me happier than seeing a builder come in with 100 residents behind them, rather than those dozens of meetings, and I sat through many of us, where they oppose you. We end up seeing good products go away because the builders no longer want to work in our cities. I like to welcome all the builders, but it starts with having great working partnership with both the elected and the local residents.
And Dennis?
Well, for me, I think it boils down to, we love the development community because that's what builds our homes where our residents get to stay and live a fruitful life. We need a partnership, a real genuine partnership. We need to work together. Are we gonna agree on every issue? No, I don't think so. But let's understand why we disagree and agree to disagree, but still hold a tight partnership together. That may even be what I would love to have, a sit down with the building, the state buildings or Baldy View, with some of our legislative staff and some of our cities and executive board with the league, and have a discussion about the dangers of legislating away things that are near and dear to cities, the dangers of continuing to put add-ons to the cost of housing at the state level, whether it be solar or whether it be fire sprinklers, and I have a background in the fire service, but it just keeps going up. It doesn't seem to go down. And so while that's all well and good, let's sit down and talk about how we can create the kind of affordability that people that maybe aren't in the lower levels of income, but people like my children who can't afford to buy a home, that one day can realize the California dream of owning their own home. So I truly stand committed to work with the league wherever I can, as well as the city of Rancho Cucamonga, to make sure that we maintain a solid working relationship. And I think communication is the key. I was talking with President Burham earlier, and he made the comment to me, he says, you don't understand, because I made the comment, I said, look, if we lowered fees and we just got rid of everything, would there be a corresponding reduction in the cost of that home? And so I didn't understand what he was talking about, so I wanted to engage a little bit more and understand what those things are, because we need the fees, but we don't need to be exorbitant about that. It blows my mind that one city can charge X and another city close to it can charge twice as much. There should be some standardization, but I think we're all doing a much better job. This kind of a forum on housing is huge. It's huge because you've got elected officials, you've got builders, you've got staffers from the state, and you've got our great people here from SCAG and from our Transportation Authority. So we all come together to do the right thing for the right reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. We're going to skip the Q&A. Before I turn it over to Carlos, let's thank our panel for a great presentation.
Thanks again to that great panel, and we're really fortunate as a region. We have now Bill Jahn serving as SCAG president, Alan